Ella had always loved quiet Saturdays, moments when the world seemed to slow down, and she could lose herself in little corners of the city that whispered peace. That day she wandered down a narrow cobblestone street, the kind of street that made her feel like she had stepped into another world, one where time moved gently and nothing urgent demanded her attention. A small art gallery caught her eye, its wooden door slightly ajar, inviting her into a world of colors and stories frozen on canvas. She stepped inside, breathing in the faint scent of paint and old wood, feeling the calm wrap around her like a soft blanket. Her eyes immediately found a painting tucked on the far wall, a swirl of blues and golds that seemed almost alive, pulsing with emotion she couldn't name, a mix of longing and warmth that made her chest tighten in the nicest way. She stood there, drawn in, forgetting the rest of the gallery, the sounds outside, even the time, letting her thoughts drift with the curves of the colors on the canvas. Then she noticed him, Liam, standing a few feet away, tall and careful, as if he didn't want to disturb anything, yet he seemed pulled toward the same painting with the same quiet intensity she felt. His eyes scanned the canvas, tracing lines and shades, and when they lifted, they met hers not with awkwardness, but with a spark of curiosity, something unspoken that made her pulse quicken. He took a small step forward, hesitant yet deliberate, and spoke softly, almost as if the words might shatter the delicate moment. "Can I see it up close?" Ella's heart thumped in a way that surprised her. She had never felt so aware of a stranger, and yet his presence was not threatening, not imposing, only gentle, almost tender. She nodded, stepping aside, feeling a curious warmth that spread through her chest as he approached, each step measured, careful, respectful. The gallery's quiet seemed to amplify the rhythm of her own heartbeat, making each moment feel heavier, more important than it had any right to be. Liam leaned slightly closer to the painting, and she watched him, noticing the way his fingers hovered just above the frame. Not touching, just wanting to understand, to connect with what he saw. The subtle movement of his eyes, the slight tilt of his head, the almost imperceptible breath he took. All of it made her feel like she was part of something larger, something intangible yet very real, a connection that needed no words. She could feel her thoughts tangle with curiosity about him, wondering what brought him here, what made him pause in this quiet gallery on a simple Saturday, what stories he carried behind his careful gaze. And then, without breaking his focus, he glanced at her briefly, a faint smile brushing his lips, gentle and unassuming, but it made her heart skip as though it had been waiting for just this moment. She realized she wanted him to be close, wanted him to see the painting, wanted him to be here, sharing the same space, the same quiet that had enveloped her, the same unspoken understanding. The gallery felt smaller, more intimate, as if it had shifted to contain just the two of them, and she could sense something delicate, fragile, forming in the air around them. Time seemed to stretch, making each second heavier, sweeter, filled with possibilities she couldn't yet name. And then, as he leaned just a little closer, inhaling softly, absorbing every color and brushstroke, Ella felt a flutter she hadn't anticipated, a mix of excitement, nervousness, and something warmer, something that hinted at the beginning of a story she hadn't dared imagine before. In that small, quiet gallery, amidst the muted light and the soft scent of paint, two strangers stood connected by a moment so fragile yet so profound that neither wanted to move, neither wanted to break it. Every detail, the way his eyes lingered on the painting, the careful tilt of his head, the faint curve of his lips, etched itself into her memory, making her heart race with anticipation, and she realized that sometimes life presented these small, quiet openings where two souls brushed against each other, fleeting and tender, leaving a mark that neither could forget. And as she watched him, standing so close, feeling the gravity of that soft, unspoken connection, Ella knew something had shifted within her, a seed of curiosity and hope, fragile but undeniable, something that promised a story neither of them had expected but both silently longed to see unfold. And just as she was about to say something, even the smallest word, a sudden soft sound from the gallery's entrance caught their attention, a noise that made them both turn, leaving the moment suspended, delicate and electric, with a tension that promised more, something waiting just beyond the frame of that painting, beyond the walls of that quiet gallery, a beginning that had only just begun. Liam stayed close to the painting, though his attention shifted as he caught Ella's gaze again, and there was a quiet electricity in the way their eyes met, a silent acknowledgement that neither had planned but both were drawn to. And in that small shared space, The gallery seemed to shrink in closing. Them in a bubble of soft light and muted sounds, a place where the world outside, the cars, the chatter, the rush of life, ceased to exist for just a few moments, letting them breathe, letting them notice the small things. The way the light hit his hair, the gentle slope of his shoulders, the careful way he seemed to respect the space of the painting without touching, as if he understood that some beauty could only be observed, not possessed. Ella's heart fluttered as she imagined what thoughts ran through his mind, what memories the painting stirred in him, and she realized she wanted to know him, every hidden corner, every quiet thought, but she didn't speak immediately because the tension, the anticipation was delicious in its own way, a thread pulling them closer without either of them consciously moving. She noticed how his breathing seemed slow, measured, and yet there was a subtle eagerness in the tilt of his head, a curiosity that mirrored her own, a desire to be part of something delicate and fleeting, something that neither could yet name, and it made her ache in the best possible way, a combination of longing and wonder, a sense that something important, something transformative, was happening in this ordinary gallery on an ordinary afternoon, and she felt both nervous and exhilarated by the thought. Liam's eyes traced the curves and lines of the painting as if he were reading it like a letter, absorbing every shade and stroke, and Ella imagined what he would say if he spoke, what stories he would tell, what laughter might escape him if he allowed himself to be vulnerable in her presence, and she realized that even in silence, a conversation was happening between them, a dialogue of shared emotion and mutual understanding, one that words could only enhance but not define. She leaned slightly toward him, unconsciously matching the rhythm of his presence, and he glanced up, catching her in the corner of his vision, and there was a flicker in his eyes, a recognition of something unspoken, a spark that made the gallery feel warmer, brighter, almost alive, as if the paintings themselves acknowledged the connection forming between them. Neither spoke for several moments, yet every unspoken word carried weight, every glance held meaning, and Ella felt a thrilling awareness of how rare it was to meet someone whose presence could stir emotion so completely, so subtly, that it bypassed logic and reached straight to the heart. She remembered the last time she had felt something similar years ago, and it made her chest tighten, a mix of nostalgia and the bittersweet ache of a past heart she hadn't fully healed. And seeing Liam now, seeing him leaning toward the art with such care, brought all those feelings to the surface, not in a painful way but as a reminder that life could still surprise, that connection could appear when least expected, quietly and without fanfare, changing the rhythm of a heartbeat with nothing more than a shared look. Liam finally turned toward her, the faintest smile brushing his lips, and in that brief expression, Ella saw kindness, intelligence, humor, and a gentle confidence that did not intimidate but invited her in, coaxed her curiosity to the forefront, and she realized she wanted to know what it felt like to stand beside him outside the gallery, to share coffee, to laugh over something small, to experience the quiet thrill of learning the intricacies of another person, a thrill she hadn't known she'd missed until now. He spoke softly, almost reverently, about a shade of blue he loved in the painting, and she listened, captivated, her mind tracing his words, picturing his perspective, imagining his experiences, and in that instant, she understood how fragile and beautiful such moments could be, how simple gestures and soft words could carry more intimacy than 100 grand declarations, how human connection could be both fleeting and profound, a delicate dance of presence and attention, and she wanted to linger in it, to savor the subtle pulse of it, to hold on to the feeling that they were the only two people in the world for these brief minutes. The gallery itself seemed to hum softly around them, the soft echoes of footsteps elsewhere, the faint rustle of paper from a nearby desk, all fading into a gentle backdrop for their unspoken story, and Ella felt her chest rise and fall with a new awareness of her own vulnerability, a willingness to let someone in, to share her quiet curiosity, her appreciation for beauty, and her longing for meaningful interaction, and she noticed the way Liam seemed similarly open. His body language relaxed, yet attentive, the way his eyes lingered just a fraction longer than necessary on her face, the gentle tilt of his head indicating interest, and it made her feel seen deeply, in a way she hadn't expected to feel with a stranger in a small sunlit gallery. They drifted from painting to painting together, sharing insights, exchanging smiles, their conversation ebbing and flowing like a gentle tide, with pauses that were just as meaningful as words, comfortable silences that felt like trust being built, trust that required no spoken promises but existed purely in the mutual acknowledgement of attention and care. Ella realized that she had been craving such connection, a slow, intentional meeting of minds and hearts, and Liam provided it effortlessly, naturally, like he had always known how to navigate the delicate space between strangers and companions, and she felt both exhilarated and grounded at once, a rare duality that made her pulse race and her mind calm simultaneously. As the minutes passed, the gallery became their private universe, a place where colors, textures, and light were not just decoration but catalysts for intimacy, prompts for conversation and reflection, and in this cocoon of art and quiet, they discovered shared tastes, subtle similarities in perspective, mutual appreciation for simple things, and a growing awareness that their meeting was no accident but a moment of serendipity they both quietly treasured. A soft laugh from Liam, sparked by an observation Ella made, echoed in the room, and her heart responded in kind, a warm flutter that reminded her of the pure joy of unguarded connection, of playful curiosity shared between two people who were discovering each other without haste, without pressure, just the natural unfolding of interest and mutual respect. She noticed how his eyes crinkled at the corners, how his smile seemed effortless, how the warmth in his presence was contagious, and she found herself leaning slightly closer, drawn by the invisible gravity between them, wishing the gallery walls could expand to hold the electricity of the moment, the thrill of possibility. But even as their conversation deepened, a small tension lingered, an unspoken question of what they were feeling and whether it mattered, a delicate uncertainty that made the air between them thick with anticipation because neither had experienced such a connection without prior history, and yet it felt inevitable, like a thread they had been pulling toward each other for reasons neither fully understood but both sensed intuitively, and the tension only made each gesture, each glance, each shared smile, more powerful, more poignant, more memorable, weaving a quiet story that would linger in memory long after the gallery lights dimmed and the day ended. Time passed unnoticed, measured only by subtle shifts in sunlight through the windows, the gradual approach of afternoon to evening, and Ella realized she didn't want the moment to end, didn't want the spell to break, and in the soft smile Liam gave her as he stepped closer to the next painting, she felt a thrilling certainty that something rare and valuable was forming between them, delicate yet undeniable, and the thought made her chest tighten with a mixture of longing, excitement, and the tender ache of anticipation, because she knew that this quiet connection could be the start of a story that neither of them had expected but both were ready to explore. If only the universe would allow them a little more time in the gallery, a little more closeness, a little more chance to understand, to feel, and to discover that sometimes the simplest permission, like letting someone see something up close, could open a door to something far greater, something profound, something that touched not just the mind but the heart. And as Liam glanced at her, with a question in his eyes that asked if this, if now, if them was possible, Ella realized she was ready to say yes to more than just a painting, ready to say yes to the fragile, beautiful beginning of whatever this could become, a yes that carried the weight of hope, curiosity, and the thrilling, intoxicating promise of connection that was only just starting to bloom. And in that quiet gallery, surrounded by colors and soft light, two people who had been strangers minutes before found themselves tethered by the gentle pull of interest, attraction, and emotional resonance, a pull that neither could deny. And though the world outside waited, for now it could wait because inside, in that intimate space, a story was unfolding, fragile, tender, and real, and they were both living it, step by step, glance by glance, breath by breath, letting the magic of the moment carry them forward into something neither had dared hope for, but both felt, deep down, might be the start of everything they had been waiting for. Days passed after that quiet afternoon in the gallery, but Ella couldn't forget Liam, the way he had looked at the painting, the subtle flicker of his eyes when he noticed her, the way his presence seemed to fill the quiet space with something electric yet calm, and she found herself returning to the gallery more often than she had planned, wandering between the same walls and colors, hoping, without fully admitting it even to herself, that she might see him again. And when she finally did, standing near the same painting where they had first connected, her heart leapt as if it had been waiting for this reunion, waiting for the soft rhythm of anticipation to rush back through her chest. Liam noticed her immediately, his eyes lighting up with recognition, a faint smile appearing as though he had been hoping for this moment too. And it was in that instant that all the subtle feelings that had grown quietly over days became impossible to ignore, a rush of longing, curiosity, and warmth mingling in a way that made her pulse quicken and her thoughts spin. They began talking, their conversation starting naturally with the paintings around them, commenting on colors, the brushstrokes, the emotions conveyed, and yet, beneath the surface, The dialogue carried a deeper weight, a silent exploration of each other's personalities, histories and hearts, with every laugh, every tilt of the head, every careful observation revealing a little more of themselves, a little more of the people they were when no one else was watching. And Ella felt herself being drawn in further, captivated not just by his words but by the way he said them, the gentle emphasis, the subtle pauses, the way he seemed fully present, fully aware of her, as if nothing else in the world existed but this shared moment, this rare intimacy born from connection rather than history. As they moved from painting to painting together, exchanging insights and memories inspired by the artwork, Ella felt layers of herself unfold, memories she had long forgotten, desires she had suppressed, hopes she had tucked away for fear of disappointment, and she found herself laughing at stories he told, surprised by his wit, moved by his sensitivity, and sensing a vulnerability in him that mirrored her own, a quiet understanding that they were both seeking something meaningful, something real, beyond the surface pleasantries and casual encounters of everyday life, and the realization brought both comfort and a thrill that was impossible to contain. Yet, despite the growing closeness, there was a hesitation, a delicate tension between them, unspoken but present, a careful consideration of boundaries and past hurts, the awareness that both carried emotional scars that made trust a cautious endeavor, and it was this tension that made their interaction so poignant, so charged, so alive, because it was not merely attraction but the merging of hearts that had known loss, disappointment, and guarded hope, now tiptoeing toward each other with tentative curiosity, a dance of emotions that neither wanted to rush yet could not resist exploring. Ella noticed the subtle gestures that revealed more than words ever could, the way Liam's hand brushed slightly against a frame, as if measuring the space between the art and himself, the gentle lift of his eyebrows when he discovered a detail she pointed out, the way his smile deepened when their eyes met in mutual acknowledgement of shared sentiment, and all these little movements spoke volumes, conveying interest, empathy, and an unspoken question. Could they trust this connection? Could they allow themselves to be seen fully without fear or pretense? She wanted to reach out, to bridge the physical and emotional distance, yet a part of her remained cautious, aware that hearts were fragile and moments fleeting, but the pull between them was undeniable, magnetic, and each glance, each subtle interaction, intensified the feeling that something significant was unfolding, delicate yet inevitable, a story of possibility that demanded attention and care. As their conversation deepened, touching on childhood memories, dreams, favorite places, and fears they rarely shared, Ella felt an intimacy growing that was rare in life, a sense that they were not merely exchanging words but merging perspectives, creating a private space where vulnerability was welcomed, and the air between them thrummed with the excitement of discovery, the thrill of meeting someone who understood, who resonated, who reflected parts of themselves they had longed to see acknowledged, and in this shared discovery, the gallery transformed into more than a place for observing art. It became a stage for emotions, a sanctuary for hearts to cautiously entwine, a place where moments mattered in ways ordinary time rarely allowed. Liam laughed at something small she said, and it felt like music in her ears, a sound so pure it made her chest tighten with joy, and she noticed how her own smile softened, how her shoulders relaxed, how the subtle leaning forward toward him was instinctive, a physical manifestation of the emotional pull, a desire to close the gap. Without words, to inhabit the same space fully, to acknowledge the rare connection that had blossomed between them in such a short time, and she realized that these small shared experiences, these gentle exchanges, were far more intoxicating than any grand gesture could ever be, because they were authentic, intimate, and grounded in the reality of being together in that moment. Yet, even as the connection deepened, a hint of doubt lingered. Recognition of past heartbreaks, of walls built around hearts to protect them from disappointment, and this cautiousness only heightened the intensity of their interaction, because each step forward carried weight, each smile, each laugh, each fleeting touch of eyes or hands held a fragile significance that made the unfolding story feel sacred, a delicate thread that demanded awareness and care. Ella felt a mixture of exhilaration and nervousness, as she noticed Liam's subtle glances, the way his attention seemed to linger on her words, on her expressions, as though he were savoring the details, committing them to memory, and she found herself wondering what thoughts crossed his mind, what feelings he harbored that he didn't yet voice, what past experiences shaped the way he navigated this intimate space between strangers and potential companions, and the mystery of it only drew her closer, deepening her desire to understand him, to know him, to be part of the story they were. Quietly writing together, the gallery felt suspended in time, a container for their growing emotional intimacy, where each movement, each word, each glance was magnified by the quiet and the shared attention, and Ella recognized that something rare was occurring, a soft but powerful resonance between two people who had no reason to be connected yet found themselves entwined by circumstance, curiosity, and mutual recognition of kindred spirits, and she marveled at the delicate beauty of it, the fragile, thrilling sense that life had opened a window, if only briefly, for hearts to meet, and she wanted to honor it, to remain present, to savor every second, every nuance, every subtle shift in Liam's expression or tone, because these were the moments that mattered, the moments that carried the weight of possibility. Hours seemed to pass in minutes as they shared stories, laughter, and glances loaded with meaning, the gallery witnessing a quiet, unfolding intimacy, a delicate emotional dance where boundaries, vulnerabilities, hopes, and curiosities met and intertwined, and Ella felt herself falling softly into an awareness of connection that was both thrilling and comforting, exhilarating and grounding, a paradox she was more than willing to inhabit for as long as the moment allowed, sensing that Liam felt the same pull, that he was carefully navigating the space between hesitance and desire, between caution and the irresistible temptation of letting hearts meet, and the awareness of this mutual care made every smile, every glance, every shared observation feel more precious, more alive, more significant. Yet as the afternoon light shifted, casting long shadows across the gallery floor, a sudden sound from the entrance, a phone ringing, a footstep, a cough, pulled their attention momentarily, reminding them that the outside world existed, and in that brief disruption, the fragility of the moment became apparent, a reminder that such connection, delicate and rare, required awareness and choice, and both Ella and Liam felt the tension of this awareness, the bittersweet knowledge that while the outside world demanded attention, the private world they had created for themselves was worth protecting, nurturing, and exploring carefully, with patience and curiosity, and they both silently acknowledged, in glances and subtle smiles, that the story they were writing together was just beginning, that the threads of emotion, attraction, and mutual understanding were fragile yet resilient, and that the next step, the next shared laugh, the next intimate glance, would carry them closer to a connection neither had dared imagine but both now longed to embrace. And as they stood there, side by side, moving slowly through the gallery, each step measured but intentional, Ella felt a swell of hope, of desire, of anticipation, a feeling so pure and overwhelming that it anchored her in the moment, made her senses sharper, made her heart beat in sync with the delicate rhythm of discovery, and she realized that whatever happened next, whatever paths their lives took, beyond this gallery, this afternoon, this quiet, shared space would remain etched in her memory, a testament to the power of patience, curiosity, and the unspoken, beautiful pull of hearts daring to meet, to connect, and to begin a story that neither had expected but both were now irresistibly drawn into, a story that promised tenderness, intensity, and the fragile magic of human connection blossoming in the soft light of understanding and hope, leaving them both suspended in anticipation, hearts open yet guarded, yearning yet cautious, ready to see what the next moment might bring, and knowing deep down that the gallery, the paintings, and this quiet electric closeness had changed something fundamental inside them, something that would not fade, something that whispered of possibilities, of intimacy, of the slow unfolding of something rare and beautiful that was theirs to explore. Together the weekend arrived, and Ella's anticipation had built quietly all week, a low hum in her chest that refused to be ignored, and as she approached the gallery early in the morning, the streets still carrying the soft chill of dawn, she felt a flutter of nervous excitement that made her heart race in a way she hadn't felt in years, a mixture of hope, longing, and curiosity that seemed to push her forward with every step, and when she pushed open the door and stepped inside, she felt a quiet thrill as the familiar scent of paint and wood greeted her, the soft light spilling across the walls and canvases, and there already was Liam, standing before the same painting that had started their story, tall and calm, yet somehow electric, a presence that made the gallery feel alive in a way it hadn't before, as though the building itself was aware that something meaningful was unfolding. His head turned slightly as he noticed her, and the moment their eyes met, the world outside seemed to disappear, leaving only the quiet intimacy of the gallery, the brushstrokes of art around them, and the unspoken recognition that something rare and delicate was happening between them, A fragile yet undeniable connection that neither could ignore, and Ella felt a swell of warmth and nervous energy in her chest as she stepped closer, a smile brushing her lips as she realized she was no longer hesitant, no longer cautious, because something about Liam's presence invited trust, invited closeness, invited vulnerability in a way that was both thrilling and comforting. He stepped toward her, and the small space between them carried weight, every inch charged with possibility, a tension that was not uncomfortable but electric, a gentle pull that made her breath catch and her heart beat faster, and when he spoke softly, almost reverently, saying, "I've been thinking about that day, about how close we were, and how much I want to know you better." The words felt like a key unlocking a door she had quietly hoped would open, a confirmation that the moments they had shared were not fleeting, not insignificant, but the beginning of something worth exploring, and she realized that her own desire to know him, to let him in, to share space, emotion and time matched his, creating a mutual vulnerability that was both exhilarating and comforting. She whispered back, "Then come closer." A small but powerful invitation, echoing the first permission she had given him at the painting weeks ago. But now the significance was greater, the stakes higher, because it was no longer just about a painting, it was about hearts, connection, and the courage to let someone see them fully. And as Liam stepped closer, the warmth of his presence wrapped around her, not in a way that overwhelmed but in a way that invited her to lean in, to match his openness, to explore the fragile intimacy that had been building quietly between them over the past days and weeks. They moved together slowly through the gallery, their conversation flowing naturally, touching on the art, on music, on memories, but underneath each word was a deeper current, a silent exploration of each other's souls, a delicate dance of curiosity, understanding and attraction that neither had rushed but both had nurtured with care. And Ella felt herself leaning into it, absorbing the subtle details of his expressions, the cadence of his voice, the warmth in his eyes, each element reinforcing the sense that this connection was rare, delicate, and profoundly meaningful, a quiet miracle of timing, presence, and mutual vulnerability. The afternoon light shifted through the windows, casting patterns across the floor and walls, and the soft shadows seemed to mirror the growing intimacy, the subtle emotional contours of a connection that was blossoming without haste, without pretense, a natural unfolding of hearts daring to trust, daring to hope, daring to reach for something beyond mere coincidence. And Ella realized that every laugh, every pause, every shared glance carried weight, meaning, and a promise that was unspoken yet deeply felt, a promise that this was only the beginning of a story neither had imagined but both now longed to live. As they lingered near another painting, discussing the emotions it evoked, Liam's hand brushed lightly against the frame, and Ella noticed the subtle tension in his body, the slight lean toward her that spoke of interest, of curiosity, of a gentle attraction tempered by thoughtfulness, and she felt a reciprocal pull, a desire to close the distance, to inhabit the same space fully, to acknowledge and explore the fragile thread connecting them, and in that instant, words seemed unnecessary because the silence between them hummed with meaning, with expectation, with possibility, and she realized that sometimes the most profound communication occurred without speech, through glances, gestures, and the shared rhythm of attention and emotion, a language understood only by those willing to truly see each other, to feel each other, and to honor the space between hearts carefully. Liam laughed softly at a small comment she made, a laugh that seemed to echo through the gallery, filling the quiet corners with warmth, and Ella felt a matching surge of joy, a recognition that they were building something together, fragile yet resilient, delicate yet intense, a connection that would leave a lasting mark because it had grown naturally, authentically, without force or pretense, nurtured by attention, respect, and a shared willingness to be open. And she felt a thrill in that realization, a mixture of happiness, anticipation, and the gentle ache of longing that comes from finally being seen in a way that matters. As they walked slowly toward the exit, lingering over one last painting, Ella felt the pull of hesitation, a small awareness that the world outside awaited them, that life's obligations and interruptions might intrude, but she also felt a stronger pull toward what was happening here, what was possible, what had been quietly blossoming, and she chose to focus on the present, on Liam, on the warmth and intimacy that filled the gallery, savoring every detail, every moment, every breath, knowing that this rare connection demanded presence and mindfulness, and that allowing herself to fully inhabit it was an act of courage, hope, and desire. Liam mirrored her attentiveness, his eyes tracking hers, his movements gentle, deliberate, and full of care, and she noticed the way he seemed to savor the moment, to commit it to memory, to appreciate not just the physical presence of her, but the emotional resonance of the connection they shared. And it made her heart swell with a combination of awe, tenderness, and excitement, a recognition that such moments were rare gifts, delicate and powerful, ephemeral yet eternal in the memory they create. When they reached the gallery entrance, neither moved quickly, lingering in the doorway, reluctant to leave the cocoon they had built together, and Ella felt a deep, grounding sense of peace, a quiet joy, and a thrilling anticipation. All at once, as though standing on the edge of something significant, something life-changing, something tender and real. Liam's gaze softened, his hand brushing lightly against hers in a gesture that was subtle yet full of intention, and Ella felt a shiver of delight, a confirmation that the mutual desire, curiosity, and attraction they had nurtured were acknowledged, respected, and shared, and the simplicity of the contact, so gentle and deliberate, carried more weight than words could convey, reinforcing the emotional depth and intimacy that had been building quietly but powerfully over their time together. They stepped outside into the sunlight, a soft breeze brushing past them, carrying with it the scents and sounds of the world beyond the gallery. Yet for a moment, neither wanted to move from this fragile bubble, this rare and precious space where hearts had met and chosen to linger, where trust, curiosity, and mutual attraction had woven a thread stronger than either had anticipated. A thread that promised something more, something tender, something worth exploring beyond the walls of the gallery. Ella felt her chest rise and fall with a mixture of nervous excitement and serene joy, aware that life rarely offered such moments, and when it did, it required courage, attentiveness, and a willingness to let go of fear, to embrace vulnerability, to welcome possibility, and she saw the same in Liam, reflected in his eyes, his smile, his gentle posture, and the way he remained present with her fully. Without pretense, without distraction, without hesitation, a mirror of her own openness and desire. They walked together slowly down the cobblestone street, words flowing naturally, touching on plans, dreams, hopes, and the quiet anticipation of what might come next, each conversation a continuation of the gallery dialogue, each laugh and glance a reaffirmation of the bond forming between them, and Ella felt a sense of completeness, a feeling that despite the uncertainties of life, this connection was real, meaningful and rare, a gift she and Liam had discovered together, and would now have the chance to explore, nurture, and cherish with patience, care, and mutual respect. And in that realization, her heart soared with a mixture of hope, excitement, and the gentle ache of anticipation for the days, weeks, and months to come, knowing that the story had only just begun, that the moments shared in that gallery were the first steps in a journey of tenderness, connection, and emotional intimacy that promised beauty, growth, and the unfolding of something rare and unforgettable, a love story that began with a simple act, a shared glance, and a soft permission to come closer, and would continue to bloom with each choice, each interaction, and each unspoken acknowledgement of hearts daring to meet, to trust, and to discover what could be together.